you hear me okay? Maybe? Maybe it's better if you don't hear me okay, huh? Uh, we got a few announcements that we have. We have women's group at on June 27th at 6:30, Wednesday night as usual and then Sunday morning at 9:30. And if you haven't noticed, Pastor Mike will be on vacation for a couple weeks. He'll be back on July the 4th. So we're going to today we're going to talk about it's a pretty tough question. It's called why, asking God why things happen. It's we don't know why sometimes that things happen to us. And like I said, it's a real hard question. God, why'd this happen to me? What did I do to get into trouble with you? Or sometimes it's like when you have kids at home and you tell them to do something and they say, why? And then you tell them, because I want you to. Well, they say, well, I didn't touch that. Somebody else did that. That's not mine. Why? What am I going to do? And eventually you tell them, well, do it because I told you to. That's why. And sometimes we see that happens to all of us at one time or another. I got this message that I've got. It's about three people that in the Bible that I think I like them. I get a lot of messages about them. Moses, and we have Paul, and then we have Jesus. They all had some kind of a question of why God wanted them to do something. The first one, Moses, he's kind of like the kids. He was walking through the desert. He saw a burning bush, and he walked up to it. And God tells him he wants him to go back to Israel and bring all the people out of Egypt. And then in Exodus 3:10, God says, and now go, and I will send you to Pharaoh, that you may bring forth my people, the sons of Israel, out of Egypt. And Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh, and that I should bring forth the sons of Israel out of Egypt? Moses is saying, why should I have to do that? I didn't put them there. And then he started in with his little excuses things. He said, I'm a wanted man there. And God says, nobody remembers what you did. It's been too long. It had been 40 years. Nobody remembered what Moses had done. He said, well, the people won't remember me. They won't do anything. They won't listen to me. We have a lot of that too. People don't listen. They listen, instead of listening with their ears, they listen with their mouth. So we need to listen up what God has to say. When God gives us something to do, then we should be willing and ready to do it. Moses, he made his excuses. The people won't listen to me. God gave him some things to do to show them. A staff that turned into a snake. They showed him his hand inside his coat turned to leprosy when he pulled it out. When he put it back in, it was clear. God gave Moses the tools that he needed. He said, and I'll be there with you. Pharaoh may not listen to you, but I got influence. I'll influence Pharaoh to where he'll let the people go. But Moses, in Exodus 4:13, he had another. He just finally said, oh Lord, I pray you send by the hand of him whom you will send. That's the Old English version, the King James version. But the way that I see that it's been translated is Moses was telling God, why do I have to do this? Send someone else. I shouldn't have to do this. And then God says, the last excuse that Moses had was, I don't speak well. And I can understand that one because I'm up here now. But he, God says in verse 4:14, he said, and the anger of Jehovah was kindled against Moses. And he said, do I not know Aaron the Levite, your brother, that he can speak well, and also, behold, he comes forth to meet you. And when he sees you, he'll be glad in his heart. God told Moses that if you can't speak well, then what I will do is I'll give you the words, and then I'll give the words, you give the words to Aaron, then he will give them to the Pharaoh or the people. But I'm going to make sure you're going to do it. I've had enough of this. It's time to do what you're supposed to do. Like I said, it's like talking to the children, the kids that that's it. Just go ahead and do it. I don't want to hear any more. So then Moses finally said, okay, I'm going to do this thing. I'll do it, but it's not really what I want to do. That he did it anyway. And Moses was successful at what he had done. Even though he couldn't, why, God, do you talk to me like this? Why should I do this? Well, because I told you to, and that you're going to carry on with what you need to be done. The next person there that I've got to, like I said, these three guys, Moses, Paul, and Jesus, they're some of my favorite ones that I like to talk about. Paul or Saul, Saul was the main persecutor of the church. Saul single-handedly helped get the church out of Jerusalem. When Jesus said to go out into the world, spread the word in Jerusalem, Judea, and throughout the world, they kind of hung out around Jerusalem for a long time. But then Paul came along, and he was helping God out. He was persecuting the church, and he was moving people around. They were leaving town because they were afraid that Paul was going to have them arrested or put in prison or even killed. So people were moving out of their Jerusalem. So Paul decided that he needed to expand out his operation a little bit there. So he went to the chief priest, and he got warrants for people that they had moved to Damascus in Syria. And they were up there where they thought they would be safe from him. But Paul says, you're not safe from me anywhere. I can get you no matter what. So as he was heading up to Damascus, Jesus met him on the road. He said in Acts 9, verse 4, he struck Paul down with a really bright light. And Paul fell to the earth and heard a voice saying to him, Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? And Saul said, who are you, Lord? And the Lord said, I am Jesus, whom you persecute. It's hard for you to kick against the goads. And trembling and astonished, he said, Lord, what will you have me to do? And the Lord said to him, arise and go into the city, and you shall be told what you must do. So Paul did that. He couldn't do much else because he was blind. When he was struck down, he lost his eyesight. There were scales over his eyes. He had to be led into town. He couldn't do anything else. And I imagine as he was there talking and speaking to his fellow men, he says, why? Why did this happen to me? But Paul was a very devout man. And he was very good at what he did. He believed in God, and he believed that the people of the Christians were evil people, and they were going against what the Jewish people were for. They didn't listen to what Jesus had to say. So Paul was going out, and he was taking these people and taking them away. He was... He said he moved people out of Jerusalem. They were moved away because of mostly because Paul was going after him. And that when he got to Damascus, the people there were afraid. A man named Ananias was told to go to Paul, and he says, why? He's an evil man. He's trying to kill us all, trying to put us all in prison, trying to do away with us. But Ananias finally did. He went to where the people were at. He went to Paul, or Saul, as he was known at that time. His name, he was known as Saul. But he was wanting to, he said, I don't know why. That question why keeps coming up. But he was willing to go and to talk to Paul and tell him what he had to do. And that after Saul got his instructions, he didn't question what Jesus had to do. He was the one that said, he said, okay, if that's what I'm going to do. And he believed in what Jesus was the Savior. And as he got his eyesight back, got a little food, he had been 3 days in Damascus without sight. I don't know how anybody that would be a tough thing to do, be in a place where you couldn't see for 3 days. But after Ananias talked to him and the scales fell away from his eyes, that he was able to see. He took some food because he hadn't any food or drink for 3 days. Just sitting thinking about what Jesus had told him on that road, that don't persecute us anymore. I've got a job for you to do. And pretty soon that Saul turned into Paul. He's going out throughout the world to tell people about Jesus. And he became the one that spread the gospel, to help spread it out throughout the world, as we do read and see what he had done over the years that we've been to church here. That Paul's been an important part of what we've learned. And then as Paul went along, as he was doing his missionary journeys, there was something that always came up against him, that he had a reoccurring disease that would come back and would haunt him. We don't know what it was. It could have been migraine headaches. It could have been malaria. They even suggested it might be malaria or something that he couldn't get over, and it would put him down for days, before he could get healed up. And at times he had Dr. Luke with him at times to treat him, to help him get through these times that he was wanting to do this. And in 2 Corinthians verse 12 and 8, it says, Paul was saying, for this thing I besought the Lord 3 times that it might depart from me. He asked God 3 times to heal him. I know that as we go through our lives that we have a lot of problems. Right now I'm going through some things with my eyesight, and sometimes it's hard to focus and read what I've got written down here, but it's just something that you pray about it. You hope that God will heal you. I've seen God heal people. That the story that I tell the most is about this is the miracle of a preacher's wife that she was diagnosed with lung cancer. They told her she had 6 months to live. Her lungs were almost ate up. 6 months later, she goes back to the doctor, and it's gone. There's nothing there. That only has to be a miracle from God. But as we think about Paul, he asked 3 times to be healed from this affliction. It could have been from I always thought that my own opinion is that it was migraines from the bright light where Jesus took him down on the road to Damascus. That's just my opinion. I think that's what more than likely would be bothering him, because anybody that's been in a bright light that's had a migraine headache, they know it's just miserable. It's just a piercing pain that comes through your eyes. And I think That's why I would think that that might have been what Paul had, that he was doing. And that I would pray to take that away too, because that really hurts when you do have that migraine. And he prayed to God, and 2 Corinthians 12:9 it said, and he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Most gladly, therefore, I will rather glory in my weakness, that the power of Christ may overshadow me. So, as God's telling them, that sometimes these things, we have to be prepared for these things, that everything's not going to be made right. That the why question is, why won't you heal me? It may be the same thing that God told Paul, that through your weakness, you can spread my glory. That's what we need to do when we go out into the world, is spread God's glory and tell him what he's done for us. Not what he hasn't done for us, but what he's done for us, so that we can go and show people and tell people about what we've done. But as God answered his prayer with this, that my grace is sufficient for you. Do we all think that God's grace is sufficient for us? No matter what we do, where we go, or what we see, why things happen to us? We just don't. We just always should believe that God's grace is sufficient for us. That we can get through this world, and we can, we won't forget that God's there for us through some of our weaknesses that we have. That we, as we go through our life, these weaknesses that we can use to show people that God's glory is there with us, that we can carry on with his message, and that we can go out into the world and tell them. The third thing and the final thing is that Jesus on the cross had a why question. The Son of God, he's hanging on the cross. It says in Matthew 27:46, and about the 9th hour, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, saying, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, that is, my God, why have you forsaken me? So why do you think God would leave his son on the cross and turn his back on him? God couldn't look upon his son. We have our own children, we have we love them. We wouldn't even think about turning our back on them. I don't believe that anyone would be willing to turn their back on their children. But Jesus, what he had taken upon himself while he was hanging on that cross, some of it's our fault. He took on the cross, hanging there, all the sins of the world, past, present, and future. And he was willing to do this. And after having 3 trials during the night, being whipped, and suffering on the cross for 6 hours. That would be the toughest thing. I don't know how anyone could have survived that. Most of the people that were crucified weren't beaten and tortured like that beforehand. They were hung on that cross, and they would last a lot longer than 6 hours. Everybody was surprised that Jesus had died after 6 hours on the cross. Just think of the punishment that he went through, that he had to go through as he was hanging there on that cross and speaking and calling for his Father. He refused to have any medicine. They gave him we talked about on Wednesday night, that the sponge that had myrrh and vinegar or myrrh and wine in it, that was a painkiller. He refused that. That would be a tough thing to do, wouldn't it? But Jesus was there for one purpose, and that was to die. He died on that cross for us. But as he died, we look to the next verse, and it says that in Matthew 27:50, it says, and crying again with a loud voice, Jesus released his spirit. As we look to that, Jesus released his spirit from himself. No man was able to kill Jesus, but he released that spirit from his body that had been punished, and he's the only one that could do that. And when Jesus cried out that final time, it was a cry of victory. It is finished. The redemption of man is complete. So as he died, he redeemed mankind. He gave us a chance. The separation between God and man was no more. It was open. God was open to all of us. Not like the Jewish people that they had to go to the temple, they had to do their sacrifices, and the priest, the chief priest went into the Holy of Holies once a year to do the duties that he had in there. But it didn't happen anymore. God was open to us, and that we could be able to carry on with what we had to do. And now it's our turn. Jesus did the suffering for us. He did the sacrifice for us. And now it's up to us to go out and to tell others about him, to tell them about the suffering that he did for us, that we can carry on what he began, and the disciples and Paul as they went out into the world. That's our job too, is to go out into the world to tell others, to bring them closer unto you. As we do this, and we think about God's grace, that's all we need is God's grace to live by. And if we can do that, then we can influence others and bring them closer to God. And we just thank him for what he did for us. God, his son, and his son Jesus, that they suffered. They both suffered. God suffered because he had to turn his back on his son, because he couldn't look upon the blackness of the sin that he had carried to the cross for all of us. So we need to remember as we go out into the world that this blackness is gone for us. This sin was sacrificed that Jesus gave, that we can tell others about him and what he's done in our lives. We just thank him for all that we do, that he does for us, and that we can help him as we go through our lives and grow closer to him as we do this. We just look to him for everything. As we close the message down today, that I hope someone feels that they can learn something from this. The question why is the hardest question in the world. And it's not bad to question what God's done for you or why something's happened to you. Ask God and answer him. Maybe he'll answer you. He'll answer you with one way or another. But we need to make sure that we are willing to do this and to say, just thank you for all that he's done for us. So thank you for being here. And I think that's we'll be back next week. I'll be back here again next week to try this again. I hope that the message touched someone, and we'll see you again next week. So everybody have a good day, and remember the 4th of July next weekend, 4th of July weekend next weekend. Just thank you for coming, and appreciate you for being here.